Good evening and welcome. I'm Mr. Ramsay, and tonight I have a couple of truly shocking, scary stories that will creep you out. So be sure to subscribe if you enjoy. With that said, let's begin. Number 1. Hey Emma, it looks like this project is going to run late, so you'll need to pick up Josie from day camp. I'll do drop off tomorrow morning instead. I was just shocked by the voicemail. It wasn't that it was unlike Mike to impose on my time and expect him to fix his problems. In fact, that was a large part of the reason he was my ex. But to think I was going to drop everything and pick up some random kid after we'd split 6 years ago was over the top even for him. After listening to the message, I called and told him as much. This isn't funny, Emma. Just because it's my day to pick up our child, you're going to pretend that I cut him off and asked if he had meant to call me or if he had gotten involved with a different Emma, because I didn't have a kid. Certainly not with him of all people. Oh, so now you're going to pretend you're not Emma Sanders? You're so fucking childish sometimes, he said before hanging up. I blocked the number, figuring it was probably some prank. Maybe he'd finally started that podcast he'd be dreaming of while we were together, but not actually putting forth any effort into making it a reality, and this was material for it. Not 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. My mum. Convenient, since I was about to call her anyway to vent. Mike called and asked me to get Josie, because he said you wouldn't. What's going on? The room tilted, and it felt like something sharp pierced my heart. Mike might try gaslighting me, I guess, but my own mother? Never. Gulping back a sob, I insisted that I didn't know any Josie. I wasn't a mother at all. Why were she and Mike doing this to me? She didn't even like him. And now she was pretending we had a lifetime connection in the form of a little girl. I'm not sure how much of my speech was coherent, because she didn't respond to any of it. She urged me to stay where I was, and she assured me she was on her way. When she arrived, only the driver's door popped open. That was good. My relief was short-lived because she stepped inside and announced she'd dropped Josie off to play with my friend Carmen and her son. Are you feeling alright? Did you hit your head recently? Genuine concern was etched on her face. I'm ashamed to admit I grabbed my mum and dragged her through the house, demanding she show me one sign that I shared it with a child. She skidded to a stop in front of the spare room and asked me what I'd done with Josephine's things. Jesus, Emma, when did you have the time to dismantle the furniture? Wasn't Josie here this morning? Where has she been sleeping? It's an incredibly helpless feeling when your lifelong source of comfort delivers a massive dose of pain and confusion. I want her out, but couldn't bring myself to say it. Even in my frazzled state, I knew that if she walked towards the door, I'd throw myself in front of it and beg her not to leave. When she put her arm around me and half walked me, half carried me to the bed, I didn't object. My night was plagued with a dream of a child with a smooth, featureless face framed by hair that had Mike's ash-brown colouring and my waves. The scent of breakfast filled the air. My mum met me in the hall and whispered that Carmen had dropped Josephine off because Mike was coming to take her to camp. She asked if I felt any better and looked crushed to learn that I'd still no memory of her granddaughter. She announced that when Mike and Josie were gone, she was going to take me to the hospital. It sounded good to me. At least one of us needed to be evaluated, and I was going to ask her to see the records of this supposed birth. Part of me wanted to hide in my room, but I needed to see this child. Don't say anything to upset her, please. The statement was gentle, but with a hint of warning, and it rattled me. I was used to being the recipient of that protective streak, not being treated like a potential source of harm. I brushed past my mum and glanced around. Kitchen empty. Living room was the same. I winced at my mum's bony elbow jabbed me in the ribs. Say something, she hissed. Your daughter said good morning. I'd briefly entertained the possibility that it was afflicted by some kind of amnesia, but my eyesight and hearing were just fine. Nobody said anything. There was nobody else here to say anything. There were 2 plates of pancakes on the table. How did Mum explain that? "Josie doesn't like pancakes, Em," she patiently explained. "She had a banana." I was unraveling. My head felt like it was on fire. "Oh, and where's the peel?" "Let me guess, it's in the garbage, just like her bed and mattress and all her fictional toys." "Yes, I threw the peel away. I didn't know you'd need evidence of your child eating." My mum had entered the kitchen, kneeling down and circling her arms loosely in front of her, cradling an invisible body. I couldn't help it. I went over and waved my hand through the empty space. Horrified, my mum acted like she was hefting something up into her arms and rushed from the room. I felt suffocated, and the only thing on my mind was getting out of there. I went back to my room and got dressed and then got my keys. I could see my mum standing in the backyard, pacing and talking on the phone as I backed out of the driveway and sped down the road. The trip ended at a hotel in the next town. The constant ringing, my phone sawed away at my remaining shred of sanity. I tried to find something fun on TV for a distraction, but that failed, because the only free channels were news stations, and they were all talking about some man who'd been found pulverised in his pool. I called the police and get a wellness check for my mother, but when I told them my name, I was told something that nearly made me pass out. "Miss Sanders, I'm glad you called. Please just come down to the station and talk. We know it was a terrible accident. We know you didn't see her. We just want to make sure you're safe and that you don't do anything to compound this terrible tragedy." Apparently, when I left the house earlier, I backed out over Josie. I'm a 34-year-old ex-stoner, high school dropout. I spent most of my formative years goofing off, screwing around and coasting through life without a care for the future, like I thought the world was going to end the next day. When it became apparent that this wasn't going to happen, when I finally matured somewhat and started taking things more seriously, it was already too late, and I was woefully unprepared for facing life in the real world. My parents finally got fed up with my shenanigans and kicked me out at 26, giving me £1,000 in cash to get started and leaving me to fend for myself. I can't say I blame them. Who wants to spend the rest of their life supporting a freeloading slacker without any direction in life? I got a job in the city, found a relatively cheap apartment, and began taking online classes, eventually earning a GED. I work as an after-hours security guard in an office building in the city. I'm not going to tell you where exactly I live. The job's relatively easy. I sit in a small room for 12 hours a day looking at a bank of CCTV monitors, do a sweep of the building once every hour during my shift, and report any unusual activity on the phone to my supervisor at the district HQ. The job gives me a lot of downtime. Mostly I just sit on my ass watching YouTube videos on my phone and listening to music. Sounds like a great setup, right? Basically, I get paid to do nothing. Did I mention I was a security guard? The trade-off is I get paid shit, and it's not like there's a lot of room for career advancement in my line of work. Plus, living in the city isn't cheap. Between rent, utilities, groceries and bus fare, I usually have about £20 in disposable income at the end of the month. So when the old piece of shit RCA box TV I brought to my apartment from my home finally went toes up, it's not like I could afford to buy a new one. I decided to go to the local Goodwill and see what they had to offer. Goodwill's a crazy place, and you never know what you'll find there, what deals you might score. My luck was in that day, and I immediately found a nearly brand new Samsung 7 Series Ultra HD flat screen with a 43-inch screen. Normally it would cost over £300, but I was able to get it for only £60, which was still a bit more than I felt comfortable spending. I took my new purchase home and set it up, marvelling at the crystal clear high-definition picture. It was easily the best £60 I had ever spent. It didn't take me long to realise that there was something odd about my new TV though. That night, my night off, I watched a new episode of a current hit network series. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the next morning, when I was on Facebook discussing the episode with a few friends I had made there, they had no idea what I was talking about when I described the plot. They told me last night's episode had been nothing like what I described. They told me I was nuts and suggested that maybe I'd been watching a different show by mistake. We argued about it for a while, then I signed out. I didn't really know or care about these people. I figured they were probably trolling me or some kind of joke. Except that's when I went to Wikipedia and read the synopsis for the episode in question. I was surprised to see they were right. Last night's episode had been the one they had claimed to have seen, not the one I distinctively remembered seeing myself. I tried to explain it to myself by reasoning that maybe what I had seen had been a rerun of the show I hadn't seen before. Maybe I had been on the wrong channel or had fallen asleep without realising it and dreamt the entire thing. I even thought that perhaps it had been a DVR the previous owners had left in the TV's programming or something. I shrugged it off and had pretty much forgotten about the entire incident by the time I had to leave for work. I worked my shift and got off at 4 AM. The next morning I took the bus home and went straight to bed. Late the next morning, while eating breakfast of cold Pop-Tarts and some reheated leftover coffee from the previous morning. Yeah, I admit I'm a bit of a slob, but hey, I'm 30-something bachelor, give me a break. I flipped on my new TV and watched the news. The female newscaster had a solemn expression. Tragedy this morning downtown when the number C subway train derailed at 8:42 AM, leaving a dozen people dead and 20 more critically injured. I changed the channel, not wanting to hear that depressing bullshit. I channel surfed for about an hour, not really paying much attention to what I was seeing. There wasn't much interesting on, so I turned on Netflix and watched The Big Lebowski, one of my all-time favourites. I followed the less than spectacular adventure of the dudes, Walter and Donnie, for the next couple of hours, and by then it was close to noon, so I turned off the TV and went and got some lunch and done some shopping before I had to leave for work later that afternoon. Later that day, at work, I was down in the parking garage on my break, having a cigarette and shooting the shit with the garage attendant, a heavy-set, grey-haired old guy named Carl, who I had kind of made buddies with. In passing, I mentioned the subway accident earlier that morning, and he gave me a puzzled look. He said he hadn't heard anything about any subway derailment that day. He asked me which train had derailed, and I told him it had been the number C at 8:42 that morning. "You're crazy," he replied with a snort. "I took the train to work this morning at 8:30 and everything was just fine." I took out my phone to prove it to him and looked up the morning's news, but couldn't find no mention of any subway derailment in the city. I got home early the next morning, feeling deeply troubled by what had happened. First I had seen an episode of a TV show no one else claimed had aired. Then I had heard a news broadcast about a subway accident that had apparently never happened. What the fuck was going on? Was I seeing things, or had I imagined it all? Maybe I wasn't getting enough sleep or something. Or maybe there was some kind of glitch in that TV. Maybe it was showing me old programming or something, and that subway derailment had actually happened in the past. I had some trouble getting to sleep that morning, feeling distinctly unsettled by what was going on. Nothing unusual happened for the next 5 days, mostly because I mainly watched movies on an old syndicated show on Netflix instead of current programming. I followed my usual weekly routine and had pretty much forgotten about the bizarre events of earlier that week. By the time it was my night off and time for me to watch the same current TV series I had watched a week before, it was another new episode, a follow-up to the pilot of the previous weeks. I watched it and then went to bed. I woke the next morning to find my phone was packed with Facebook messages from the people in the group I had belonged to. Some of them were amazed, some of them curious. Some of them seemed downright disturbed, maybe even a little frightened. All their messages boiled down to basically the same thing. How the fuck had I known what the next episode was going to be in about a week in advance? I was confused at first, then slowly it dawned on me. I did a quick search for the synopsis of the last night's episode. It wasn't the episode I had seen the previous evening. It was the episode I had seen the week before. The episode they all argued hadn't aired. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I didn't answer any of the messages. In fact, I deleted my Facebook account right then and there. I sat there in the bed for over an hour. Even then, I still tried to rationalise what had happened. None of the people I knew on Facebook lived in the same city I did. I knew most TV shows film all new season episodes well in advance. Maybe the satellite that provided the network feed to the people who lived in my area had screwed up and skipped an episode, showing me the one that was supposed to air after it. It actually kind of made sense. Well, to an extent. Even still, I didn't really feel in the mood for watching any TV that morning. I listened to music instead while I did some much overdue chores, cleaning my apartment, doing my laundry, washing my dishes, then went downtown to run a few personal errands. Then I went to work and did my usual 12-hour routine of sitting on my ass in the security office, goofing off on my phone and occasionally checking the monitors to make sure there weren't any fires, burglars or zombie serial killers in the building. I went down on my break to the parking garage to have my usual cigarette to make chit-chat with Carl. We stood around for about 10 minutes, smoking and making small talk, not really talking about anything important. I casually asked him if he watched the TV series I did, and he just grunted and shook his head. I can't stand TV shows about a bunch of privileged yuppie assholes whining about their problems. I can't relate to that shit. I just shrugged, and that was pretty much that. A few minutes later, my break was nearly up, so I put out my smoke and we said goodbye. I finished the rest of my shift, then went home and went to sleep. I spent most of the next morning and early afternoon playing video games. When I came into the building around 4, the manager was waiting for me with a grim expression. "What's up?" I asked him, concerned. "You didn't hear?" he asked me. "No? Hear what?" "Carl, the parking garage attendant's dead." I was shocked. "How?" "Didn't you see the news? He was killed in that subway train derailment this morning." I felt a sense of unreality wash over me, a feeling of deja vu. I felt like I was having a dream. What time did it happen?" I asked the manager, my voice sounding far away. "This morning, at 8:42, he was on his way to work." "Which train was it?" I asked him, already knowing the answer. "The C train." For a second I felt lightheaded. I thought I was going to faint. I willed myself to clear my head and get a grip. I thanked the manager for telling me, expressing sadness at Carol's death. I clocked in at 4, then went into the security room and sat there in front of the monitors. My mind was reeling. It was apparent what was happening, had been for some time, but I had been in denial before then. But now, in the front of Carol's death, I had to acknowledge the truth of it myself. The TV I had bought second-hand from Goodwill store for £60 could somehow, some way, receive broadcasts from a week into the future. Could, in effect, predict the future. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, and frankly, I didn't care. I sat there dwelling on this, considering the ramifications of it all. I felt a kernel of wild excitement building up within me as I thought of the possibilities. I had to force it down and keep myself in check. I could tell everything that was going to happen a week before it actually did. Sports scores, the weather, politics, natural disasters, crime, accidents. The list went on and on. I felt a sense of guilt in there as well, as I'd had the chance to prevent Carol's death, but hadn't acted on it while I had the opportunity. But told myself that even if I had accepted what was going on before the subway accident and tried to warn him, he wouldn't have believed me anyway. I thought of the good I could do with my newfound power to foresee future events. I could prevent crime, save lives. I could learn the outcome of the next presidential election a week before anyone else did. I could even... A wild idea suddenly occurred to me, and I bolted upright, galvanised with excitement at the tempting plausibility of it. The Powerball lottery drawing was tonight at 11. The jackpot was currently at over 500 million. I debated it briefly in my mind, the morality and the ethics of it. Then said fuck it to morality and ethics. I called my supervisor and told him in no uncertain terms where he could insert my job, then left the office building for the last time, feeling giddy and almost whimsical. I took the bus back home, knowing that I wouldn't have to rely on shitty public transportation for much longer. In a couple more weeks, I would be driving myself around in a new Rolls Royce. I raced up to my apartment and turned on my miraculous new TV, waiting anxiously with a pad and pen as the hours passed and 11 o'clock slowly crept around. I watched eagerly as the little plastic balls bounced around in their machine, jotting each of the lucky 6 on my pad as they rolled down the chute one by one into the clear glass tube. I stared in awe at the 6 numbers I had written down. In a week I was going to be 500 million richer. I had finally discovered a way to rig the lottery that not only worked but was perfectly legal. No one would ever know. I was rich, could finally start living the life I had always dreamed of. On TV, there was a sudden interruption. A special news report. A grim-faced newscaster sat at the anchored desk. He spoke solemnly, trying to remain composed on air, but his voice broke with an edge of panic several times as he spoke. This is a special Channel 13 news report. The White House has just released a statement. At approximately 9:27 Eastern Standard Time this morning, NASA detected an asteroid with 100-mile diameter on a direct collision course with Earth. Scientists predict it will enter our atmosphere within the next week and impact with a velocity of 60 miles a second, causing worldwide extinction, and there's nothing that can be done about it. The end of the world is upon us. I stared at the TV in shock. This couldn't really be happening. I changed the channels rapidly. It was the same in all other networks. One newscaster said that rioting and looting was already breaking out in all major cities as a panic took hold on the streets. They then cut to the Pope at the Vatican leading the world in prayer, speaking in Italian with an interpreter translating into English. "O our God, we are heartily sorry for offending thee." I turned off the TV, feeling numb. I looked down at the now useless winning Powerball numbers I had written down. I tore up the piece of paper. I went to the window and looked out of the calm city street below, then up at the night sky above. I stood there for a while, lost in thought. Then I sighed, got out my phone and called up an old buddy of mine who used to score for me and also lived in the city. I told him I wanted an ounce of dank weed and he said he could hook me up the next day. Why the fuck not, I thought to myself as I ended the call. Now was a good time as any to fall back into old habits. I used to coast through life without a care for the future, like I thought the world was going to end soon. Now I have an excuse. Thank you all for listening. As always, if you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like and maybe subscribe. It's one of the best ways you can help support the channel. With that said, I'll catch you all in the next one. Thank you.